Hello, and welcome to this online moment. I so appreciate everybody tuning in, and want to express my deep gratitude as well to Charya Hesse, who will be providing questions in the realm of community, and to James Hoagland, who will be asking financial questions. And also President Reoch will be joining us shortly. We're having a little bit of a technological issue bringing him on, but he should be joining us soon. I'd like to begin the hour by just mentioning that this is the first of what we intend to be regular online moments where the Sangha can join, ask questions, and we really build this sense of community and the sense of open interaction. It's certainly been something that I've been trying to find ways to do, and I really appreciate this technological approach. It seems to bring a lot of benefit. So that's very, very helpful. Through the course of this hour, what I hope to achieve is really opening up to the complexity of the situation at Shambhala Mountain Center and some sense of the balance between the very real challenges that we face and the very real opportunities as well, and some of the things that are moving along, one might say. So I think with that, I'll ask Acharya Hesse to lead into the community development part.
Welcome, everybody. I'm delighted to be here. And Michael, you can hear me just fine, yes?
Yes.
Good. Well, I'd like to start off sort of from a Garuda's eye view, looking down from the top. I first came to Shambhala Mountain Center in 1977, and it's been many things over the years to many different people. And I'd love to get an update, just a sort of feeling from the cutting edge of where we are about what is SMC, what is Shambhala Mountain Center, and what is the vision of Shambhala Mountain Center.
Yes. So what is Shambhala Mountain Center? I think Shambhala Mountain Center is many things to many people. For some, it's the place they were born into the Dharma. For others, it was a place where they grew up in the Dharma. The way I try to contextualize or launch the inquiry around what SMC is how can SMC be of benefit? So there's really a number of ways. I think there's three main ways. One is as a place where we provide programs for people to meet their mind. And all of the richness that involves. So that's Shambhala programs, that's hosted programs on a range of different things from Qigong to yoga to relationships. And then also rentals where we bring people in and they rent the space and we support their process in their manner. So programs where we host, that's one aspect of it. Another one is community. And community is really writ large. It's the staff at SMC, it's the land, the creatures there. It's creating an environment where there's a sense of path, where people arrive there to work and staff, and when they leave, our aspiration is for them to be, you could say, shining warriors, exemplars of the result of living in a Shambhala community. And then along with this, at the same time, it's equally important that we're working on a Shambhala community that needs to be sustainable as well. So the financial aspect of SMC needs to be sound, needs to be one where we can say this is how a Shambhala business and community can actually work together. Do you feel I answered the question, Dan? Is there an aspect that you want to dig into a bit?
Yeah, that's great. Because I really do feel that aspect of community, the aspect of programs, and then the basic ecology or business ecology of the place, they're all important parts.
Yes.
And I always felt that we tend to focus as people who come to Shambhala on the program we're doing. But what we need is a mixture of the dralas and the lungta of the staff.
Mm-hmm.
I'd love to hear how ecology and working with the staff has brought these important and somewhat hard to hold on to aspects before have really fostered that.
Mm-hmm. It's a very rich question. I think the starting point for this is really that without having a sound community there, and you can take this out in layers. This exercise that we're in right now is another extension of community. Without the fundamental community that lives on the land, being one where people are inspired and where they're living a life that is balancing practice, balancing community development, balancing work. Without that sound basic community at SMC, the heart of SMC is hollow. So for me, developing community and developing financial stability are equally important. Without one, there's not the other. It's just not possible. And I think what you talk about there is the dralas. That's kind of you could say the secret reference point to all of this. That you can have a feeling. SMC is such a powerful land, and you can have a feeling of how things are going. People who come up to the land who've been coming there for decades, they tune in pretty quickly, and you get these instant reads on what's going on now. And if it happens to be a day where there's been a particularly challenging community situation, you get certain feedback. But I like to think that overall lately, there's been this kind of slightly raised eyebrow. Things feel a little different.
I've certainly felt that. Mm-hmm. And I've often felt that Shambhala Mountain Center is unique in its potential to be a little mini Shambhala. It's got its own valley, its own stupa. And when community starts to thrive there, you start to experience a bigger idea of what Shambhala can be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so for me, that gets very specific. So, for example, in our organizational structure, we have an executive council and a community council, and both are responsible for their areas, and then come together under the leadership of the deputy director, Steve Seeley, who's doing a great job of bringing that cohesion together. It's reflected in what you could say is somewhat painstaking work in putting together a curriculum for the staff that combines staff path, that combines community activities such as the great work that Susan Chapman, Charya Chapman, and Greg Heffron have been doing in Green Zones. We recently had some training in that. Putting together a coherent, integrated curriculum for the staff that also includes professional development and that's tuned to the rhythm of life at SMC. In the summer we don't have a lot of time to study. In the winter we can. We have a lot of new people who arrive in the spring, so what do they need to learn? How can we have great staff retention with a 3-year arc of teaching so that at the end of 3 years, someone who's ready and passionate about it could come out as a meditation instructor and a teacher. So these are things that are being really carefully thought through to ensure that we can sustain and continue the development of community that we're putting into place there.
That's very exciting. I hope someday my daughter will spend a few years there and get her basic training. I'd love to change our focus a little bit. For many years now, we've been under tremendous pressure from the health department to meet our drinking water standards and install our wastewater plant and our wastewater collection system. And I know we've put a couple of $1 million into that, or $1 million at least, and with tremendous success. But I'd like to get an update on where the projects are right now.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And interesting that this is coming from the community perspective, because there are community implications for this. You know, we have little flora floating around in a building that are actually at work and doing great work right now, I should say.
You mean
so the
processing
treatment. Sorry?
You mean processing the wastewater?
Yes, yes. So the treatment plant itself is working. It's been built, it's functioning. It's being fed wastewater through bypass piping. The next stages are the pipe that needs to be laid. That would be the final pipe that would go from the wastewater plant to the downtown area, and then on to Red Feather, and then in the future on to staff housing and other locations. Coming out of the fire, the year of the fire and the evacuation, there was no way we had the capacity to fulfill those final two phases of hooking up the pipe. And this last year and this year has been somewhat challenging financially as well. What we're doing is we're working with the, how to say it, so there's about a $600,000 price tag to those phases of completion. In order to facilitate that, getting that $600,000, we're working with the EDA on a grant that we hope will cover a significant amount of it. We'll also have to have some money in escrow in order to apply for the grant. So we're targeting this coming spring as the time when we'll have that money in the bank and we can actually apply for the EDA grant. And they've been working closely with us in designing our application. So my projection at this point is that while this particular 18-month period is a pretty challenging one for us financially, so we won't be able to complete it during this period, that in, just make sure I'm getting the dates right, 2015 and 2016, that in 2016 and 17 we should be able to do the final phases of that. So there's still some work, and we do need to talk to the state about this some more. That's roughly the timeline. Are there any aspects of this question that I didn't answer, Dan?
That's a very inspiring. Let me turn the speaker down here so we don't have much. That's a very inspiring story because it's been such a long project. You know, it's taken a tremendous number of years to complete it, and it means there's been an amazing commitment on the part of the community and a number of directors. Without that, we couldn't be open. I know that to be true. I'm also curious about how we're more sustainable. So that we're sort of good hosts to the Dralas in how we live our lives there.
Mm-hmm. So there you're talking about sustainability in general, at
yes,
SMC,
indeed.
more of an environmental approach.
Yes.
There's work. Yes. So we're doing, there's a number of projects that are happening right now around, for example, working on lowering our fuel footprint, so to speak. So we have a target of lowering the amount of fuels that we use by about 10%, and we're doing that through some simple and fairly obvious efforts, such as sealing things up properly, ensuring that things are properly insulated, also an initiative with the staff to ensure that, just for example, on a very meat and potatoes level, that lights are turned off when they're not being used, that we use our day and nighttime heating alternative switches, so that kind of thing. We're also doing work with sustainability, a project that I hope we'll be able to answer more fully in our end-of-year report. We're working with a company that's one of the leaders nationally in sustainable design and analysis, so there'll be a lot more detail. It's a little too complex to try to get into right now, but in our year-end report, there'll be information coming out about that. Where our new land steward has increased the footprint of our garden, and there's still a bunch of work there. We need to get some funding together for a greenhouse, but we're hoping to have more produce coming out of there. I think those are descriptions of the main initiatives.
That's great.
That's great.
Yeah.
The last question I wanted to ask has to do with how you do programs at Shambhala Mountain Center. Obviously, we do a lot of programs within the Shambhala curriculum and tradition, but also there are other teachers and other traditions and who we host. So how do you think about that? How does that work? Your public presence and your Shambhala presence, so to speak.
Yep. It's an interesting question because there's a lot of history to it as well. You know, SMC was funded for many years on the 3-month seminary. And that's what SMC was, essentially, was a place where those 3-month seminaries were held. And that was sufficient financially to float the boat. So when that changed, I've just been told we have 2 more minutes. When that changed, so did the financial picture. So hosting Shambhala programs is simply not going to be sufficient to fund SMC. That is clear to us. So we need other revenue streams. So some of this we'll probably get into more with James, but in terms of the choosing of programs, there is a question around integrity. We host the Shambhala programs. We co-host programs where we put them together with other teachers and advertise them through our marketing and such. And then we rent the land to certain groups. There have been people that have approached us where we've said no, it's not appropriate at SMC for various reasons. And we try to do that in as kind a way as possible, but we're aware that SMC means something in the larger world, and that for us to have something in our catalog or on the land requires that we think that it's a worthy organization, so to speak. So there's no question that we need to have these kind of programs if SMC is to survive. We bring as much integrity to this as we feel we can, and there are times where we've said no.
Thank you very much, Michael. I'd like to pass the ball to Jim, who is going to bring up some opportunity to discuss some financial issues.
And I'd just like to mention that President Reoch has joined the call, and I'd like to welcome you, sir, and thank you for joining us.
Michael, this is James Hilton, and there's a number of people that have asked about Shambhala Mountain Center debt. If you could tell us what is the extent of the debt right now and how much annual payments are, as well as how we got here.
Okay, so the two very distinct questions. The easy part is how much it is. Some of the numbers are interesting that I hear. SMC at the end of the last year, the end of 2013, had about $4.6 million in debt. At this point, we have about $4.3 million in debt. And that's give or take $100,000, I'd say. But those are the figures. That's the ballpark we're in. So, Jim, just in terms of debt, does that answer that question?
That's helpful. And what's the annual debt service?
So the annual debt service, it changes every year. There's, with the bond arrangement that we have, there are payments every summer that are principal payments, and every year they increase by $5,000 to $10,000. So I believe that the principal payment for this summer, in June 1st, was about $265,000, and next summer I think it'll be $270,000. The total payment on the average year is around $550,000. This particular 12-month period of June 1st, 2014 to June 1st, 2015, we have 2 principal payments to make. So for this period, there's an extra burden on SMC of roughly $250,000. So that's very, very challenging for us to meet that. and it's caused significant challenges, let's say. How did we get into this situation? My understanding is that SMC, prior to the lodges, there were significant questions as to how our population, particularly some of the devoted senior students, could actually come up to SMC and partake in programs. That it's a very challenging environment. So there was a recognition that we needed the lodges. So Jeff Walcher arranged funding for the lodge construction that was based on bonds. Incredibly brilliant move, and I don't know anyone else that could have done it quite the way he did it. The financials that were built into that, some of it included things such as the three-month seminary during the summer, which changed. So part of the financial picture that underlay the projections around it, they shifted a little bit. Then there was also the past Jeff's time, with the rise of the internet. Teachers can simply rent a hall in a city, advertise on the internet, and get students to come. So SMC really has had to raise its game in order to appeal to teachers to come and teach there. There was also the financial collapse back in the first part of the century. And then also a lot of teachers have their own centers. They've been developing their own centers. So again, SMC has more competition in that case. So a lot of these factors were ones that made programming challenging at Shambhala Mountain Center and led us to be in a less viable position, or one could say a position where it's more challenging to meet the debt service that we need to meet.
And
what's the question?
Yeah, that's very helpful. As far as the revenue goes, the revenue to expenses, could you talk about that and also how it's changed over the past 5 to 10 years with this change of no longer seminary being there? And so the ratio of expenses to revenues, how has that changed and what is it currently?
So I assume for most people what they're wanting to hear about is the overall picture. So that is not just the expenses of payroll, of food, but also the debt service. Would that be where you're coming from as well, Jim?
Yeah,
that you really
total revenue to total expenses. We're talking bottom line here.
Yeah. So I would say that, you know, honestly, what I want to do is actually provide some numbers, and I probably should have thought this through prior to this. But we will send out numbers. They also come out in our year-end report. Our income from programs is probably around 4/5 of what's needed to cover our inclusive expenses. So the remainder of the amount comes from fundraising, and that's on a cash basis. So we can make it through a year on a cash basis, but we can still lose money from an accrual accounting perspective. And the difference, simply put, an example of that would be capital depreciation. So we have buildings, and every year their value goes down. So we, for example, last year had a loss of, I think it was around $600,000, but we made it through the year on a cash basis. So that is still a problem that we have that loss. We're doing things to address that, but it's definitely an issue. One of the issues is, for example, there's a thing called the debt service ratio that's established by the bond of assets to expenses. So we need to be in keeping with that ratio. So these are very important reference points and challenges for SMC, particularly during this period, this 12-month period, where we have the two principal payments.
More straightforwardly, 10 years ago, how much were we in the red at the end of a year compared to how much we are right now? Is the amount between expenses and revenues increasing or getting closer?
Jim, I can't answer that question. I don't know. I don't have the information about 10 years ago, but if that's of interest, I'll pull it together and provide an answer for you, but I would be making something up to try to give you that kind of historical picture right now, and I don't want to do that. I would say that over the last... Go ahead, Jim.
Okay, well then let's look forward from here. And what do you see besides the debt service that you were talking about that we're going to get hit with this summer? What other obstacles do we need to prepare ourselves for? And how do you see the revenue to expenses coming closer? And what are we going to do to get there?
Okay. So in terms of things on the horizon, big tickets on the horizon, the wastewater completion. Assuming we get the EDA grant, we still need to have about $150,000 to $300,000 in the bank. So that's a significant issue on the horizon. The principal payments, those are significant. Beyond that, there are things that keep coming up. You know, with the fire, for example, that's one of the best examples of things that are simply unknowns that we can't predict. Then there's capital depreciation of actual infrastructure at SMC. Due to the financially tight situation, we haven't been able to stay ahead of all of the repairs that's needed and all the maintenance. So there are things that could break that we would need to repair. We do what we can, and we're trying to address that. But to be honest, there are things that we just can't predict. So that's, I hope I'm answering that aspect of the question. In terms of what we're doing about it, on the programmatic side, we have these three pre-existing revenue streams of Shambhala programs, of hosted programs, and rental programs. We recognize that that fundamental business model, supported further by fundraising, isn't sufficient. And that's why we've launched our online work. So Awaken the World was the first version of that. We had projected that if we made $15,000 on what was a free program, that would be hugely successful. Because basically the model was coming out of generosity, we give it away, and then if somebody wants to purchase it and download it, then they pay $97 and they get some extra things with that as well. So bearing in mind that $15,000 was considered to be really, really successful, we made net probably close to or a little over $65,000. So this, for me, is one of the major indicators that this fourth revenue stream that's off land, that can happen 12 months of the year, stabilizing our financial picture, that builds our market share, that we can use as also as a venue for supporting our teachers, both our Shambhala teachers and those other teachers that we co-host programs with, building their presence, that this can have a cumulative and interactive approach whereby we can build a robust revenue stream online of conferences and courses, and that these can lead to larger, longer programs on land as well, and that this approach of generosity can also support our teachers in developing a more sustainable livelihood.
When do you project that Shambhala Mountain Center will reach financial sustainability?
So understanding that projections are projections and plans are plans. What we are planning, the business plan we're developing that we've articulated, is that at the end of 2016, our intention is to be revenue neutral, so that revenues and expenses inclusive are balanced. You know, I can't guarantee that, of course, but that is our goal. And a large part of that is with the online revenues as well. So I know that that was a lot of information there, Jim. Are there areas there that weren't clear that you want to explore or that you wanted to probe a bit?
No, I think this is helpful to know that for Shambhala Mountain Center to survive, we're going into beyond the land. And it's great that that was the successful approach. I think one of the other, you know, and being aware of what we have to look ahead, there had been a question I had about living in tents. Have we looked at the cost of keeping all the campgrounds and all the staffing and upkeep of the tent, and since the maintenance of that and all the plumbing, has there been a look at the budget as to are there operations that are costing more to do than, even though a tent is cheaper to stay in, is it costing SMC more to have somebody in a tent than it is to have them in a room?
So help me with understanding this question, Jim. We have a certain stock of tents, and they certainly are old, and they need constant repair. In order to purchase new tents, we're getting rid of the lowest quality ones and replacing them, and that has a certain expense. But the revenues that a tent brings in are greater than the expense of a tent and of the plumbing in the bathhouses at Ratna and at Ratna and Vadra. The expense of building a new lodge are much, much higher than that. And in terms of the long-term vision of SMC, maybe in a decade or two, we might be able to replace some of those tents with lodges, but for now, there's no viable alternative than tents for SMC for housing summer staff and some number of our guests during the summer.
Are the lodges being able to be filled for most of the programs and the tents being the overflow, or are people still staying in the tents, and are we having programs where the lodges are going vacant?
Our occupancy rate in the lodges is about 28 to 30%. So in the hotel industry, that's not great. A lot of that vacancy is during the winter, during the off-season. When we have a big Shambhala program, usually the lodges are sold out. And then there are other times during the year when the lodges are sold out. But for example, this past summer, we had one Scorpion Seal program, and we had Sacred World as two of our major programs, and the lodges did not sell out. So there are various reasons for that I can get into, but certainly maximizing usage is something that we're doing our best to do. But however you cut it, at SMC, there's always going to be vacancy periods, and our occupancy rates are going to be below industry standards, given the natural phenomena that occur there. 6 foot of snow the next day, that kind of thing. And we just got the 2-minute warning.
Okay. Well, I'll give the rest of my remaining time to Mr. Reoch. I'm sure he has lots of questions as well.
Thanks, Jim.
I don't. No, I don't. Please, no, I didn't join this call to ask questions. Of course, there are profound questions I could ask, but that would be a different call. So,
all right.
Probably, Michael, you want to move on to the general opportunity for people to ask questions. I thought Richard was
going to read those questions from the general. I apologize.
No problem.
Okay, so the staff here are collecting various questions, and I've got them on cue cards here. So many questions. We'll answer the ones we can, and we'll follow up on those we don't get to. So that's less of a question and more of a statement of our commitment to continue this exchange. How are you feeling about what's going on at SMC? What's working well? Wow, thank you. I'm feeling pretty good. This experience of being the director at Shambhala Mountain Center is certainly the most focused and intense experience of Shambhala path that I can imagine, and certainly that's happened in my life. So I'm appreciating it, and at the same time I feel very definite pressure and responsibility as the person in the local seat at SMC to make sure that we continue. And sometimes it appears very challenging. So that can be a stretch sometimes. What's working well? The Awaken the World that I mentioned was just a smash success. So that is fantastic. It's one of the main planks in our business plan and our strategic development, so that was great. My feeling is that the staff mandala is the best I've ever seen. There's so much inspiration. One metric that I use is how much of the leadership worked their way up. And when I look around the executive council and the community council, everyone there either had another job at SMC or at another land center. So there's a lot of integrated experience that's being able to be brought to bear to the leadership of Shambhala Mountain Center. We just finished our fall staff retreat, and the turnout was very close to 100%, with the exception of some people who had to do some work during the retreat. That, for me, is just one of the most central reference points of how things are going at SMC, that the staff are inspired with the path and the experience of Shambhala. What else is going well? I actually feel I'll move on, and maybe this question can be one that recurs in future ones, in future exchanges such as this. How much truth is there to the rumor that SMC's very survival is in question? There's truth to it. Most organizations such as Shambhala Mountain Center would have savings such as reserves, which would be 3 months of operating revenues, or a capital depreciation fund, which is money set aside for fixing things. We don't have that, and I don't know if we've ever had that. So things such as making the payments to the bank, making payroll, covering our food costs, these are ones that we don't have a lot of leeway on. So it's challenging. We need to be able to bring in the kind of revenues from fundraising and programs that will get us through the year. So I believe SMC will make it. I also know that on a month-to-month basis, it's like someone living check to check on payments. That, I think, is a reasonable analogy. How can we help? I think there's a number of ways you can help, and anyone can help. The most obvious one is right now, we're in our end-of-year campaign, and we hope that people are inspired by what's happening at SMC to donate generously and to really knock it out of the park this year. That if there's a year where we do need support, this 12-month period we're in with the 2 principal payments I mentioned before is one that is providing a significant financial challenge. I think another way is to come up to the land yourself. If you've ever experienced doubt about Shambhala Mountain Center on a community level or on a financial level or really any level, come up, do a retreat and renewal. Spend time with the staff, come and have a conversation with me, and just see for yourself how things are going at Shambhala Mountain Center. My belief is that you'll actually be inspired. Talk to people that have spent time up there, leading our datums and that kind of thing. So actually plugging in and tuning in, reading the chronicles and such that we send out so that you're informed, that would be incredibly helpful. If you feel a sense of confidence in what we're talking about today and what's happening at SMC, then please share that with your friends and with the rest of the Sangha. And if you don't feel the confidence, if you still have questions, then please do contact us, and we really want to have this sense of open, honest communication. I know that, for example, there's questions that we're not going to be able to get to today. I've had some conversations with some people that sent some in, and that what we're hoping is that over time we can really answer all of the questions that, that arise for people. How can Shambhala International continue to support the major land centers and smaller land centers? I'm not quite sure how to answer that question, but I'll do my best. Shambhala International and the work that happens there is essential to the functioning of our community. The work that Maggie Colby does, for example, it's irreplaceable. Without Maggie, things would not work. Without the amazing work that Carolyn's doing, this just wouldn't work. The teachings wouldn't go out, the programs wouldn't get planned, the teachers wouldn't be found. There's so many ways that things are centrally supported in our community that without Shambhala International, we just wouldn't be able to work. So one of the major things that Shambhala International can do to support the major land centers and smaller land centers is to have the unified giving model function and work well. I know that they've put a lot of energy into it, and from my perspective, unified giving model is central to our community actually being able to flourish. The first stages of it will not include the land centers, but over some years, as the unified giving model matures and becomes stable, then those funds can actually support the land centers as well. So that's one of the aspects that I think will be incredibly helpful, is the completion of the unified giving model. Beyond that, I think I'd need some more details as to what the intent of the question is in order to answer any further. And so please do feel free to email, if whoever, for example, sent this question in, do feel free to email our team with further aspects of the question, and we'll do what we can to answer it as well. Let's see. So there's a question here in regard to SMC's accumulated debt, and I hope I answered that when I was speaking with James, that our accumulated debt at this point is around $4.3 million. And an operating deficit, if you sorry, SMC has an operating deficit if you take our revenues and our expenses. Fundraising definitely is an essential aspect to how we survive. So in that sense, there's an operating deficit. Again, if you look at accrual accounting on a profit and loss statement, we have a loss. We had a loss last year, and we will have one again this year. Is this sustainable? Absolutely not. And it's not part of SMC's long-term expansion plan. What we are wanting to develop is a means whereby we can have clear benchmarks that trigger certain capital projects, so that the sustainability of the financial underpinning of any capital campaign is, or capital development project, is actually clearly laid out and explainable to anyone who's interested, and the one could say not open to the vagaries, for example, of fundraising and how a financial collapse in the stock market could affect fundraising. So those kind of factors are ones that we're wanting. Let me start again. We are wanting to avoid those kind of variables and ensure that our revenue streams are ones that can support the work we need to do. That's the model that we're developing here. Does SMC think that fundraising is the only answer? No, absolutely not. Fundraising, my belief is that if we're able to provide a sound financial basis for SMC, that fundraising will actually increase at that point. So fundraising as the stabilizing source of revenues for SMC is not a viable model. It's actually the other way around. Can you provide the most recent audited financial statements as well as the most recent IRS Form 990? These are public domain documents, and they're available to anyone who is interested in reading them. They're very dense, complex financials, but they're just in the public domain, so anyone has access to them who wants them. If you need information on how to get them, please feel free to contact us, and we can show you how you do that. So yes, they are completely available. If new for-profit ventures are being considered for SMC, will SMC obtain contractual commitments from outside vendors prior to selling shares equity? Without contractual commitments, there's no real collateral, and this would just become more fundraising disguised as for-profit venture. I'm going to read that again because I'm not quite clear on the question. And if any of the moderators that are on the call would like to chime in on this question, please feel free. If new for-profit ventures are being considered for SMC. So I am very open to for-profit, non-profit collaboration. Our gift store is an example of that. And then also some of our online work will involve, or hopefully will involve, affiliate partners who have for-profit, who have a for-profit nature. So I don't consider for-profit to be a problem for SMC. So yes to that part, we are considering this. Will SMC obtain contractual commitments from outside vendors prior to selling shares equity? So if we do begin a nonprofit venture and we open that up to investors, would we obtain contractual commitments from the vendors that we partner with? So if I understand this correctly, SMC starts an online business and we're in collaboration with someone who sells Gondans. And then we want to get funding for this, so we turn it into an investment opportunity. Will we be using this as a kind of a roundabout, hidden fundraising venture, or will we obtain contractual commitments from those vendors? So this is a very detailed question. Off the cuff, I would say yes, I would want commitments from vendors, in that if we're entering into the nonprofit world, all of those same stabilizing factors that are done for prudent financial arrangements, we would want to have involved as well. So we wouldn't want them to be simply roundabout fundraising attempts. Or if we do, we would make that clear. I'm hoping that I answered the question. Does anybody online here feel that there's an aspect of that question that I didn't answer?
Can you hear me? Am I, you can hear me? Okay, great. You know, the aspect of nonprofits working in profit-making arenas is something that is coming to the fore very powerfully in the nonprofit world. I work with the Beanstalk Foundation here in Boulder that works with many, many nonprofits, and it's actually a movement. And the technicalities of how to do that in a healthy way is something that's being investigated by so many nonprofits. But it's really essential part of how to create a healthy economy, because you have to have a very strong commitment to your mission, and at the same time you need to support the mission. And quite frankly, the profit-making model works better for the support, and the nonprofit model works better for the mission part. So the aspiration to combine the two is a really healthy thing, and it requires work and inspiration and investigation to know how to do it in a disciplined way. I have a lot of confidence that we can do that, but I'm very happy that we're investigating it. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Dan. So I have a note here from the team. We have 5 minutes left, and we will send out information about how to stay involved, including how to donate to SMC, which is a topic dear to my heart. I think at this point, with 5 minutes left, I just invite the other moderators to ask any questions that they have or any comments before Richard wraps everything up in about 3 minutes. with that, maybe I'll turn it over to President Reoch, and thank you.
So I'd like to say that I was extremely happy when Michael and his team of Kaylee and Mimi said they wanted to have this online tea salon. I'm not quite sure where the tea is, but I can definitely see where the salon is, because I think I'm going to get the answer. Okay. You know, Shambhala has become in a way, a huge a community crossing a lot of national borders and languages. And so, although we may think of Shambhala Mountain Center as being based within the United States, of course, people come to it from all around the world, and probably there are people from all around the world on this call. And trying to find ways to share information, to open up for this kind of dialogue, and to try and do it in a way that feels authentic and meaningful is really difficult, because not everybody's comfortable with this kind of technology, and I think we're all feeling our way in doing this. And so I know that this is an experiment. I know that the team has the intention to learn from, you know, undoubtedly there were glitches and hitches and all sorts of things on this call. Probably there are a lot of questions that haven't got answered. I can just assume all that's the case. And so we all have to learn from this, and we have to find a way to be able to do this kind of outreach. The reason for that is not just to answer questions, but to have this kind of question and answer develop into a dialogue, so that there's less of a sense of some kind of us and them. And the us being an incredibly small, beleaguered number of people trying to make something work, and the them being everybody who wants it to work, but doesn't, you know, quite feel they're part of the us that's making it work. And in a deeply divided society like the one that we live in globally, you know, this can build up to sort of antagonisms and suspicions and doubts that are understandable, but we really have to find ways of working through this. So I really want to say that I appreciate this, and I hope that that whatever difficulties there are in getting this started, that people will see, as I have experienced in talking to the team, this is a really deeply sincere way of trying to make people feel that there's a much larger team involved in accomplishing the goal of Shambhala Mountain Center. Now, there's one other thing that I think it's really important to bear in mind. I certainly know this personally from the 12 years that I've been the president, which is that, I could put it this way, that in my experience anyway, everything in Shambhala is a stretch. And in the beginning, I used to think it's because we were badly organized. And I believed that if we got better organized, that this sense of stretch would come to an end. But I've seen that that this is I'm going to use the term ruthless lineage. Ruthless in the sense of determined to stretch us beyond who we think we are as people, what we think we can do as people, and what we think the impact we as people can have in the world is. That's on the personal level. Then there's the Shambhala as a mandala, or as an organization, absolutely determined to take us beyond whatever any of us conceive as the limit of Shambhala. As the Sakyan once said, there's no such thing as a small version of Shambhala. And I say this not because it sounds good, but because people like Michael, people like Dan, who was on the board and a former director, and perhaps other former directors who are on this call, and everybody who knows, for example, Shambhala Mountain Center intimately, knows that it's almost like a vehicle for stretching us. And I just want to pay personal tribute to those who, which includes all the staff at the present time, as well as those who've got us to this point, who've been willing to be stretched in this way. And I particularly want to thank everybody who has continued to stick with this amazing project, because as we all know, if I could put it this way, it's a stretch. So thank you.
Thank you. And yes, thank you everybody for joining us today. President Reoch, Charya Hesse, Mr. Hoagland, I really appreciate your time and heart. And to everyone that was here, as President Reoch said, this is the first of these we've done, and we're very much looking forward to doing more and to being able to develop this approach to one that is as meaningful as it possibly can be. So please do send us your comments on how you felt this went. If you have inspirations of how we might otherwise address certain topics, please, we're extremely eager to hear any advice that you might have. And with that, have a fantastic morning. Thank you.